You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, guys, we are here for the crossover event of week one. It's Locked On Chargers. It's Locked On Raiders. I'm here with your boy Q, and we're going to be breaking down the biggest storylines of this game this weekend when the Chargers and the Raiders finally get that rematch after probably the most dramatic game we saw in 2021. So I'm so excited to get into it. We're going to get into just the biggest storyline for the Chargers. It's J.C. Jackson and the kind of ambiguity of whether he's going to play or not, because that'd be a nice guy to put on Davante Adams, And for the Raiders, it's going to be the offensive line and just if it can hold up. A lot of new guys there, guys with, not a ton of experience, at least at the very moment that we see right now, with guys, right tackle being a guy that played right guard for you guys last season. We'll get into the key matchups that are going to decide the game and figure out what the final score of it's going to be. I mean, I don't even know where I'm going to go with that one yet. But what's up, Q? I'm excited to get into this one, man. Football is back.
Yeah, man, week one matchup, and who wouldn't want this one, right? AFC West division opponents. We all remember week 18. Remember how, the Raiders and Chargers went down to the wire overtime, depending on who was going to go to the playoffs, who wasn't, where they're going to tie, and all of a sudden the NFL, they're really good at what they do, man. They put this schedule together, so they have these two division opponents square up on week one. This time at SoFi Stadium. So, yeah, man, looking forward to it, and just to know that football is back is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys want to follow us on Twitter, you can find me at Dan Talk Sports on Twitter, and you can find your boy Q at your boy Q254 on Twitter. As always, we appreciate you guys following us there. But today, it's the biggest storylines we have to get into, and I think for the Chargers, it's pretty simple because they have to go up against a guy named Davante Adams, and they don't know if J.C. Jackson's going to play. And for me, Q, I mean, that is going to play a huge factor because even with these two teams at full health, which the Raiders seem to be, I mean, nobody on the injury report for the Raiders this week.
Right.
It would be close. It's a divisional game. I never really sensed a blowout in this game from the Chargers' perspective. A lot of moving parts on both sides. But having J.C. Jackson is huge. I mean, there's a reason they went and spent the money they did on him, and there's a reason that Brandon Staley kind of needed to get his guy to run his kind of defense. We heard this morning, Wednesday, as we're recording this, that he was not going to play this weekend. That was the report from NFL Network. And then now you have Brandon Staley saying, hey, I haven't ruled it out yet. He has the walking boot off. He might play, but to me, that is a huge factor in a game where I don't think the margin is very wide anyways.
No, it isn't, and J.C. Jackson was the prize of free agency for a lot of teams, and the Chargers were able to land him, and that was a big deal for multiple reasons. Obviously, the Chargers have to face the AFC West, which is the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the Raiders, and the Raiders had Davante Adams, as you mentioned, so they have a three-headed monster, Davante Adams, Darren Waller, and then Hunter Renfrow, so you would like to have J.C. Jackson out there with Asante Samuel. So, when I saw that report that he wasn't going to play and then, well, maybe he will, to me, Daniel, it feels like he probably won't play, but I mean, you never know. I know he's a gamer and he's going to want to be out there. And everything I've heard, and I'm sure you could tell me a little bit better, he's been everything that he's, cracked up to be so far in training camp and preseason. So it would be a big loss for the Chargers if he's not out there.
Yeah, I mean, he did call out Justin Herbert. He said, hey, I don't think Justin Herbert's targeted this side of the field at all since I've been here, right? And Herbert's like, yeah, no, I think I did. But, yeah, I mean, it is huge. And, I mean, I know a lot of, Chargers fans are downplaying. I'm sure, Raiders fans are downplaying those weaknesses too. But at the same time, I mean, that is a huge difference. It is the guy that they went. And I think it's nice because the Chargers do have, I mean, the worst case scenario, you're going with two guys who started for you last year. And I think Bryce Callahan over Chris Harris Jr. in the slot when you have someone like Hunter Renfrow is going to be a big upgrade for the Chargers. But still, J.C. Jackson is J.C. Jackson, 17 picks, Mr. INT the last two seasons. But what do you think the biggest story is for the Raiders as they head in this huge matchup?
Well, I mean, it's obviously the offensive line, in my opinion. I mean, you have right now Jermaine Illuminor slotted in to be the right tackle. The Raiders earlier this offseason, when cutdowns came, they got rid of Alex Leatherwood, the former first-round pick, number 17 overall, just after one season with the team. So they moved on from him. They have a new guy there at Lester Cotton Sr. At the right guard position as well. So everything's new on the right side of the offensive line for the Raiders. And there's still question marks, even the center position. Andre James, he's only a second-year center. John Simpson, he's a second-year full-time left guard right now. And, he didn't really do that great. He got a little bit better towards the end of the season last year, but it's a lot of youth, right? And so Colton Miller is the steady guy at the left tackle spot. So that's good. And I think that, there'll be a better offensive line with him out there. But in the preseason, they gave up over 15 sacks, right? And that's that's not good. That was over the course of 4 games, but still,
Sure.
that's not good, And then you're going up against Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, and we know those guys could pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. So I'm assuming that they're going to do exactly that, and they're kind of licking their chops, waiting to test out this Raiders offensive line. So the Raiders, Josh McDaniels, Derek Carr, all the offensive gurus that they have on that squad are going to have to figure out how to protect the offensive line, protecting Derek Carr, right? I mean, it's not just how to protect Derek Carr, but also how to help out that offensive line. So if it gets off to a slow start, maybe they could scheme something up to try to slow down Maxx, slow down Bosa, because, man, those 2 guys alone could wreck a game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think on both sides, right? And we can probably get into the right tackle position for the Chargers too, where I think, the Raiders obviously have a big advantage there, and there's a lot of question marks there. The Chargers have a completely new side of their right side, right? Their new right guard, Zion Johnson, a first-round pick, and Trey Pipkins is taking over after Storm Norton had that job last season. But, I mean, it's so important, though, just because I think with the offensive line, like, the Raiders, right? You have new pieces. You have someone like Davante Adams. Now you have a 3-headed monster with him and Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow. And it's like, but it starts up front, because it's like, if you really want to see that showcase, if you really want to see what this offense can do, they have to be able to hold up against a new and improved front for the Chargers.
Right, exactly. And, also in that front is, the interior part of the defensive line. And the Chargers, as you very well know, weren't that great at stopping the run last season. So I'm thinking that the Raiders are going to try to slow down Mack and Bosa by also having a heavy dose of the run game. But if that interior defensive line, as you mentioned, as I mentioned as well, could step up and play the role that they were brought in. I mean, again, the Chargers, and this is why a lot of people are very high on the defense, is they went and addressed a lot of areas of concern. Again, I'm not breaking any news to you, but if they could slow down the run, then that gives Bosa and Mack an even better opportunity, right, to pin their ears back. So the Raiders' offensive line, to me, is really going to be the key to this game. If they can open up some holes for the run game for Jacobs and whoever else decides to run the rock, and if they could protect Carr as well so he can get the ball out of his hand. He gets the ball out of his hands really quickly, so he might be able to get the ball to Adams real fast, but you still want to see him take a few shots down the field and see if they can, test the big play ability of what they have with the 3-headed monster that they have with Waller, Renfrow, and Adams. So it should be interesting. I think it's going to be a hell of a chess match, just seeing how that offensive line matches up against the Chargers defensive line.
Yeah, for sure. And that's going to play such a huge part of it, because if they can hold up, there are big question marks, like I talked about with JC Jackson, right? Who's going to cover, Davante Adams or Darren Waller, even if you don't have JC Jackson? Because if you have JC Jackson, right, you can put JC Jackson on Davante Adams and you kind of just take what you get, right? He's probably going to get some. Both of them are probably going to get some. But then you have, you put Michael Davis on Darren Waller. You could put Derwin James on Darren Waller. Once you lose JC Jackson, you lose a lot of that flexibility. And those are going to be some of the big, kind of questions and the big matchups that are going to decide this one. And we're going to get into the biggest matchups of this game and what we think is going to decide it, because I do think there are some really interesting matchups, like the Chargers receivers going up against a rebuilt secondary for the Raiders.
Yeah.
I want to know what your confidence level is in those guys. But special thanks to Prize Picks for sponsoring the crossover Thursday. Right now, you guys can get a deposit match up to $100, a free of $100 when you use the promo code LOCKEDON at prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. But I do want to get into those matchups, and I'm wondering what you think are the most interesting matchups. So we're going to get into that. But first, I want to tell you guys about something that is changing the car rental game. I just found out about this. It's nuts. It's Turo.com. Turo is changing the car rental game because they are the largest car sharing marketplace around. I mean, I already looked it up. Just near me, there was an Audi, there was a Rolls Royce I could get, there was a Tesla. I mean, it's really changing things up. Yeah, I mean, and it's way less than what I've paid at car rental places before. With Turo, you get to browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion. You can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip, or you can get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday or holiday, maybe even a music video. This is a great place to do it. Test drive that new electric vehicle you've always had your eye on, or you can just be like many of Turo's hosts and just you can actually find everything that you need there. I mean, it's such a thing. Saving money, especially with everything as expensive it is right now. Turo is going to change things up for you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Ditch the boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. All right, we are kicking things off here. Crossover week 1, Chargers, Raiders, Locked On Chargers and Locked On Raiders here to break this thing down. It's a huge matchup. I mean, divisional games, right? They always say they're worth double. And I think especially in the AFC West, with how things are right now, I mean, this is the craziest AFC West since I've covered the team. I mean, easily. And maybe one of the best divisions ever on paper, and we'll have to see how it plays out. But these games are so important, and I think between these two teams, there are a lot of really interesting matchups that could end up deciding this thing. So when you're looking at the best matchups for this game, where did you go first?
Man, I mean, there's a lot of good questions, because obviously the Chargers have some really good weapons on the outside, and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. I look at the secondary for the Raiders, and I believe Nate Hobbs is going to be a dog this year. I think he's going to really step his game up. You're going to see him outside. You're going to see him inside, kind of see him all over the field. But, I really think that, as I talked about the offensive line in segment number one, we were just talking about, just question marks and what's going on with the team and, biggest storylines. I think that, you're going to have to look at the Raiders defensive line as well. The Raiders defensive line against the Chargers offensive line, Maxx Crosby, remember him week 18 in Allegiant Stadium, and he basically wrecked the game. He did what the Raiders are hoping that Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa don't do on Sunday, which is wreck the game, right? He wrecked the game. He had like 3 passes defense, a couple sacks. I mean, he did the damn thing, right? He was out there and he was a monster. So I want to see now with Chandler Jones being his other bookend instead of Unique Ngakoue, how that changes, how the interior of the Raiders defensive line, because similar to the Chargers, the Raiders had to bolster that defensive line, that interior. They went out and they signed a bunch of free agents that are over 300 pounds so they could slow down the run, because that was something that Gus Bradley, the former defensive coordinator, wasn't worried about stopping the run. He was worried about just getting to the quarterback. He wanted those guys a little thinner that can kind of split the block and get to the quarterback from the interior. Well, under Patrick Graham, they want to stop the run. They want those big nasties on the defensive line on the interior to be able to do that, plug the hole up, and and then allow Chandler Jones and Maxx Crosby to pin their ears back. So I'm very interested. Again, this game to me is going to be one in the trenches, both offensively and defensively. So my biggest matchup, and even though I can go in multiple different areas around the field, I think it's got to be the defensive line of the Raiders and the offensive line of the Chargers.
Yeah, it's huge. And Trey Pipkins definitely won the job there. I still don't think anyone's feeling great about it until they see it. Obviously, when you have a guy like Rashawn Slater that you don't have to worry about, an all-pro on the left side, there are ways to help out your right tackle. But I think you're right, Q, from the perspective of it is in the trenches, because I think there's a lot we have to learn about the Chargers, because how did the final game end last season, right? A run that everyone knew was coming, and it still went for, 8-9 yards, set up an easier field goal and sent the Chargers packing. Like, that is how it ended. And I think that was such a nice little kind of, symbolized everything the Chargers went through last season and how bad that unit was. And I expect it to be improved, but how much, right? Because it is all new additions. And it's funny hearing you talk about Gus Bradley, because it's like the Chargers are going through the same thing, right? This is year 2 of Brandon Staley coming from Gus Bradley, where they were doing the cover 3 and they had different kinds of defensive linemen. They've already gotten rid of most of the interior guys that they had, guys like Justin Jones and Linval Joseph. They have different dudes now. They have beefed up on the inside, but we haven't seen it yet. I think a kind of underrated part is Khalil Mack and what he brings. Obviously, what Khalil Mack brings as far as setting the edge, as far as what he brings to the table as a run defender. That I think is going to be huge, but that is a huge test. The Raiders offensive line and the Chargers defensive line. On the flip side of that, I mean, you talked about the pass rushers going up against an inexperienced line, but I'm looking at the running game, because I do think the Chargers are not a defense you want to play in 3rd and long. No team ever wants to be in 3rd and long, but the Chargers specifically, when you have, closers like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, maybe J.C. Jackson and Derwin James, you don't want to get in those situations. It starts on 1st and 2nd down. It starts with the Chargers being able to hold up on the inside. That is a huge matchup in this game, and I think it's going to be improved. How much is still hard to tell at this point.
One other matchup that I think is very intriguing, at least to me it is the guys on the sideline. I think head coach Josh McDaniels, the first time with the Raiders, obviously first time he's been a head coach since the debacle in Denver and going back to New England as the offensive coordinator, going up against Brandon Staley, there's guys that still question him. Sometimes I question if he makes the right call on 4th down. I think that he made a couple bad decisions in that week 18 game against the Raiders, but that's me. It's just what I think. Brandon Staley's a defensive-minded guy. Josh McDaniels is an offensive-minded guy. So I kind of want to see how that chess match plays out as well, because I do believe the Raiders last year under one head coach John Gruden and then Rich Bisaccia didn't really have the best as far as head coaching goes when it comes to like play calling. I know Bisaccia wasn't a play caller. That was Greg Olson, but he wasn't a good play caller at all, right? Greg Olson was, in my opinion, terrible. And John Gruden was very suspect. Even though I liked him as a coach, I still thought he was pretty suspect with his play calling because it was pretty predictable. I think Josh McDaniels changes things up. In my opinion, he's one of the better offensive play callers in the league. So now he takes on another role as a head coach. So how does that chess match work? And, what I saw in the preseason from Josh McDaniels that I really respected was calls getting in quickly, like boom, 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 boom. There's a rhythm to it. You'd
Right.
see the ball snapped at 18 or 17 seconds a lot of times instead of 5, 4, 3. Hurry up and snap the ball, dummy. Hurry up and snap the ball. It wasn't
Philip
like that.
Rivers special.
Yeah, there was always a rhythm to it. And so I want to see if he can maintain that in the regular season. Preseason is different. I want to see if he can maintain that in the regular season. And I want to see how Brandon Staley, as a defensive-minded guy, how he counters that. I think that's an intriguing matchup as well.
100%, because the whole thing with Staley last year, and I think the reason he got a pass on the Chargers having one of the worst defenses in the NFL is, those were Gus Bradley's dudes, right? Those dudes didn't fit what I wanted to do. Last year, I was so focused on improving the offensive line, which was huge and helped them last season tremendously, that I kind of, let things go on the defense. This year, they did it on the defensive side. He doesn't really have any more excuses now. He has all the pieces that he needs. He might not have J.C. Jackson, which is obviously a huge chess piece to have, because then everything gets easier for the other 10 dudes on the field. But you're right. And I think the other thing for Josh McDaniels, it's proving, hey, I'm not just an offensive mind. I'm not just, Bill Belichick's shadow that can only have success in New England. I can branch out. I can be a head coach, because I'm sure even Brandon Staley learned last year that it's a lot more than just being a coordinator, right? It's a different job. And just because you're good at one doesn't necessarily make you good at the other. I would say in Staley's defense, I think going for it as much as they did won them more games than it lost them. But in the final spotlight game of the season, it ended up hurting you when you go for it, inside your own 20-yard line, and then you give it up. And then we all saw the rest of that game played out. They did go for it in like 7 other fourth downs and made it in that game, but that was more out of desperation. One last matchup I'm wondering about is, I think obviously one of the strengths of the Chargers, and one thing they're trying to repeat, is their offense, right? And their high-powered top 5 offense, scoring top 4 in DVOA, going up against a new Raiders secondary. I know you touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
What is your confidence with new guys like Anthony Averett, new guys like Rock Ya-Sin, right? New guys in the safety group. How are you feeling about that group going up against Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and I think a really improved Josh Palmer?
Well, I feel great about Nate Hobbs. I'll tell you that right now. I feel fantastic.
I do too. That dude's good. Yeah.
He's a guy, and just watch him in training camp. He's a dude, right? He's going to be a next level player. Anthony Averett's got a lot to prove. He did well in Baltimore. He was forced into action because of injury. He did pretty well. So I was like, okay, that's fine. But Rock Ya-Sin looks like he's going to be the guy that's going to get the start across from Nate Hobbs. So to me, he's been a guy that I was real high on him coming out of Temple, but in my opinion, he kind of underachieved with Indy, right? So this is one of those. He's in the last year of his contract. Can he go out there and prove that he's the guy that he expected to be when he was coming out of college? Now, under Patrick Graham, they're playing this press man coverage a lot more, and I think that fits Rock Ya-Sin, what he likes to do, being a former wrestler. So I think he likes to get that hand-to-hand, combat-like and get physical with the guys. But I don't know if that's going to, work. You got a guy in Mike Williams with a big body. I expect Hobbs to be matched up with Keenan Allen. And, and then who knows what's going to happen after that. You got a Meek Robertson. Maybe he slides into the slot. You have Sam Webb, an undrafted free agent from a D2 school that, he made the 53-man roster. So maybe he gets a little bit of burn. There's a lot of questions in the secondary. Again, I feel great about Nate Hobbs, and I think everyone else still has to prove it. Trayvon Merrick on the back end, the former second-round pick out of TCU, solid. I think he's going to get better in this scheme with Patrick Graham. Jerron Harmon, he's on the depth chart behind Trayvon Merrick, but he's a guy that you mentioned closers earlier. He's a guy that in New England they used to call him the closer. He'd always come up with an interception at the end of the game to go ahead and seal the deal. I think you're going to see a lot of him on the field as well. I don't know how they're going to actually deploy their safeties. They have Harmon, they have Merrick, they have Jonathan Abram. Where's he going to play? Right? There's a lot of questions that they have, but between Hobbs and Merrick and Harmon, I feel pretty good about the secondary, but obviously there's a couple questions still.
I think the Chargers is the same, right? It's like you feel really good about Derwin James. You feel great about J.C. Jackson. I feel really good about Nazir Adderley. I thought he improved a lot last season. After that, though, there still are a lot of question marks. Will Asante Samuel Jr. make the leap after getting held back by a couple of concussions? Can Michael Davis, after getting benched last season, come back against, some really, really good offensive skill players for the Raiders? And how is it all going to play out? Well, we're going to get into how it all plays out. But first, thanks to Prize Picks for putting this on Crossover Thursdays. We're super excited about it. But we're going to get into our final score predictions and how we see this game playing out coming up right after this. Back here for the crossover event of week 1. It's Locked On Chargers. It's Locked On Raiders, trying to decide how this game is going to go this weekend, because I think there's one thing we do know, and that's everything kind of goes out the window with these divisional games. And the Chargers went 3-3 in the division. They split the series with the Raiders last season, and both are trying to get off to a 1-0 start in the AFC West. And it is a hugely pivotal game for both teams. You want to get off to a strong start, but when things are all said and done, we went over the biggest matchups, the biggest storylines. Like, How do you see this game playing out? What do you think the score is going to be?
It's really interesting with this game because I was reading some nuggets earlier today about this game or actually about a lot of games in the NFL week 1. And the one thing I learned is that the Chargers, the Raiders, the Seahawks, and the Saints have all started the last 3 seasons off with a W. Right. So obviously that's going to
got to give.
here, right. Something's got to give. One of these two teams has to lose the game. So that's going to be interesting. Obviously, the game's being played in SoFi Stadium. I don't think that it'll be a sound issue for the Raiders because I believe that it'll be a ton of silver and black representation in SoFi Stadium. I mean, they're being in LA. I mean, we kind of know how it all is there. So I don't think there'll be a problem there. But it's really week 1. There's so many questions. You talked about college football earlier. College football is great, but what you don't know about college football week 1, you don't know what you don't know. Which
the rankings mean nothing going into that.
And you don't know what these guys really look like. And look, I don't know how much the Chargers played their starters in preseason. The Raiders didn't. Right? They didn't. Yeah. You didn't see Derek Carr. You didn't see Davante Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Chandler Jones, Maxx Crosby. Saw a little Nate Hobbs in the Hall of Fame game. Saw a little Trayvon Merrick a couple times here and there. Josh Jacobs was in the Hall of Fame game, but that was it. Yeah. So those are the starters, right? So how long does it take for them to get on the same page? Does that, are they a little slow out of the gates? So there's a lot that goes into this week 1 matchup where I believe the next time that the Raiders and Chargers play, it's going to be a lot more, okay, I know what this team is going to look like. I know what this team is going to look like. This week, I'm really not 100% sure. Now, I'll say this, and it's not me trying to, I don't know, just be cocky or whatever. I just, for some reason, this week, I've gone into this week feeling pretty comfortable that the Raiders could go into SoFi and get a victory. But, man, I mean, everything's got to go right? That offensive line's got to come together. They got to protect the ball. They've got to be able to cash in the red zone. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be a close game. What I learned about Patrick Graham and the defense so far, at least what I believe I learned, is that they find a way to stop a team in the red zone from getting a touchdown at least once. Not all the time. They don't shut guys out, but at least once. And that's something that the Raiders didn't do last season. Under Gus Bradley, they were the worst team red zone defense-wise. They were the worst team in the league. They were dead last, right? So, I mean, every time you got to the red zone, guess what? You get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, and you get a touchdown. It's like Oprah was handing those damn things out, right? I mean, everyone was getting a touchdown. So I think that that's going to be eliminated a little bit. So I expect the score of this game to be a little bit lower. So if I had to pick a score, and I'm just going to roll with the Raiders getting a victory because that's kind of what my guts felt like all week, I'm going to say 26-20. I think that there's going to be one time or maybe even 2 times that the Chargers will have to kick field goals instead of settle for a touchdown. So I'm gonna say 27-20. Let's go with that final score, and the Raiders drive back to Vegas or fly back to Vegas, and they're in a good mood.
I'm definitely going to miss on Locked On Chargers, like the staple keynote for both the games last year, which is just like the Raiders give up like 100% touchdown rate once you get into the red zone. So it's like, just make it to the red zone. Key to the game. Get in the red zone. Gus Bradley will take care of the rest. Yeah, I mean, that is huge. And I think especially with how good these teams are, right, and what the margin, for error is for a team even like the Chargers who added a ton of talent, like, a couple of red zone stops do win you games in this league, right? Making a team lose 4 points like that, or whatever the case is. I mean, I know going into this one, there's no way I want it left up to Daniel Carlson's leg. I mean, that's my whole goal. Don't leave it up to that dude in the clutch to, kick a field goal to tie or to win the game. And so I think the Chargers need to make it so that isn't that, right? So I think for me, I'm making this with the assumption that J.C. Jackson's not going to play. That's kind of, I mean, I think it's close to.
Just for the record, I did that too. So that was part of the reason why the Raiders scored 27.
Exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. So that's because I think it is close to 50-50. It was weird because Staley today was kind of like, I'm not going to confirm he's not going to play. But it's like there's so much gamesmanship. And it's like, what does he have to gain from telling the Raiders that J.C. Jackson's not going to play, right? He has nothing to gain from that. He has everything incentive to keep it close to the vest. That being said, I if I had to lean one way, I'd say he wasn't going to play because especially if he's already getting back on the field, if they want to try to ramp him up from that Thursday night game, I'm not saying you should look over the Raiders by any means, but you definitely don't want to rush him back and then lose him for KC anyways, right? Or lose him for restart the 2 to 4 week process, which is what it's already been right now because he can't really re-injure anything or re-aggravate it because it wasn't a real injury. It was taking out something that was like an unnecessary bone or something, but you could reopen the wound, right? And now it's another 2 to 4 weeks. That being said, I think the Chargers do give up more than I would hope from their new defense this year. That's a little bit sad. But I do think the Chargers end up pulling it off because I do think the offense, that's the great thing about this team. Returning every offensive starter for the most part, and it's hard to argue they got worse at any starting position this year. Then you have, hopefully steps from a guy like Josh Palmer and steps from even Rashawn Slater in this offensive line. I'm going to say the Chargers do what they want offensively against a secondary that still has some question marks with the Raiders. I'm going to say 31-27 for the Chargers in this one.
Oh, okay. Close game right there. Nice little shootout for week one action.
Keep it 4 points. I don't want a field goal to tie it. That's why it's 31-27.
I'm not mad at that. And look, I mean, it very well easily could be a shootout like that, and I think that the Raiders definitely don't want it to be a shootout like that. I think that they want, like I mentioned earlier, to be able to make the Chargers settle for field goals a couple times in the game and do what they do. And again, I think J.C. Jackson being out is or if he's out, and I'm just going on the assumption that he is, I think that's a big factor. So that's kind of where I'm leaning and think that Davante Adams starts to show who Davante Adams is. And it's like, pick your poison, because you got Adams, you got Waller, you got Renfro. It's like, that's tough right there. And then, Mack Hollins also is a little sneaky good. But the one thing I can say about both these teams, and I've said it for a long time, I feel like there's not really a team in the league that these teams could go and play against and say, oh, man, there's no way that they're as good as them. Right? I mean, the Chargers have plenty of talent on both sides of the ball. The Raiders have plenty of talent on both sides of the ball. I feel for the first time in a very long time that every team in the AFC West has enough talent to go and beat any team in the league. Not just in the division.
Sure. Yeah.
League, right. You know what I mean? I think there's a puncher's chance with every team. And so that's what's going to make this division that much more fun, is that, you can't just go into every game and be like, oh, that's a dub. That's a dub. I remember when those days were when it's like, that's a dub. That's a dub. Now it's not that simple.
There's no gimmies.
Right?
There's no gimmies in the AFC West at all.
No. And so I'm interested to see how, Denver, how they gel with, with Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, just because Hackett's a brand new head coach. But I mean, the talent's there. So there's plenty of talent to go around the AFC West. So I can see a game shaking out to a 4-point win, either way, Raiders or Chargers. I always hate predictions because it's so difficult, but I just like to roll with my gut feeling. And for some reason, man, my gut all week has just been like, yeah, I think the Raiders are going to win this game. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, it's going to be at SoFi Stadium. It's a beautiful place. It's going to be fun to check it out. But yeah, that's really all you can do is hope that no one gets injured and you get out of week one feeling pretty good about yourself and your team feels pretty good about themselves and they move forward to week two, because it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Totally. It is a marathon, not a sprint, but I think both teams are getting out the box on a sprint, right? Because this game is important because of what's lying ahead, right? Because you don't want to get into a hole. It's so hard to dig yourself out. There's so few games in the NFL that you want to get off to a fast start every year. Both these teams have in recent memory, but at the same time, the Chargers have Kansas City on Thursday Night Football. And even if I like how they match up against Kansas City better than I did last year, it's Patrick Mahomes. Like the dude's a freak, and you just never know how those games are going to go. So the thought of getting off to an 0-2 start potentially for the Chargers is, terrifying in a loaded AFC. And for the Raiders, I mean, you have the Cardinals. They're not going to be no slouch. I mean, that team was one of the best teams in the NFL for more than half the season last year, and have, an explosive, exciting young quarterback in Kyler Murray. And then you get Tennessee, and then you get Kansas City. So it's like, it is a marathon. And that's why, someone like J.C. Jackson, maybe they lean on the side of cautiousness, right? Or, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still so important. This game is hugely, hugely important, even in week one.
Yeah, it is. But both teams, really, I think every team in the AFC West has to get off to a good start. I mean, the Raiders, as you mentioned, they play every division opponent in the first 5 weeks, right? I mean, they go into the bye week and they've already not knocked off, but played against the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Chiefs all in the first 5 weeks, right? And so if you get into an 0-2 hole, like you mentioned, you could look up and be like, what happened? Right.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about it, man. These two teams have to get off to good starts, and they have traditionally the last 3 years. As I mentioned, both teams have won their opening game. That's not going to happen this year. One of these two teams has to lose. So it's going to be interesting to see. And then, as you mentioned, if it happens to be the Chargers and they got to turn around with the Chiefs, then all of a sudden they're not in a position where it's a must win. But man, you sure would like to get a win, right? I mean, it's one of those.
Feels like it, yeah.
You don't want to feel into an 0-2 hole, and then even though the Raiders had the Cardinals week 2, to follow that up with, with having Denver, having Tennessee, all these AFC opponents as well, conference games. That's big too. As you saw how the end of the 2021 season shook out, where all these teams, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, the Dolphins, they were all kind of jockeying at the end for a place in the playoffs. Obviously, the Chargers. You got to win the AFC games. You got to win AFC West games. So, man, it's going to be a tough conference and an even tougher division.
Yeah, and I mean, like, what do you have to go in the division to win the division, right? Like, it almost feels like at 0-2 in the division,
Right.
I mean, that's going to be like it feels like you have to go at least 4-2. The winner of this division, you would think, is going to go at least 4-2 inside of the division, at least in my opinion. Like, it has to be somewhere around there. Well, you just burnt your 2 losses if you're the Chargers and you don't get it done one of these
Right.
two first 2 weeks. There are a lot of moving parts. This is the first week we get a chance to actually see how Josh McDaniels is with the Raiders as their head coach, what Justin Herbert looks like in year 2 of Joe Lombardi's system. So
Yep.
many things that we don't know until we get to watch the games. But make sure you guys are always checking out Locked On Chargers and Locked On Raiders, getting into everything going on with the game. I know for the Locked On Chargers, we have a game preview tomorrow. We'll get into some more kind of keys for success and things the Chargers have to take care of and not beat themselves against the Raiders. But Q, where are you at? Where can everyone find you? What are you going to be talking about?
Man, I mean, everything is week 1 action, man. Excited about, the different matchups on the game. The Raiders offensive line and what they're doing defensively, head coach Josh McDaniels, defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, just how it all shakes out. So, yeah, everything you can find of my work at your boy Q254 on Twitter. I tweet out a link to the show each and every day. And, I always have it up super early in the morning. So if you're on your way to work super early, you can always lock in and lock into the Raiders and check out what they got going on. And I know you got a lot going on with Locked On Chargers as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, it's exciting time to cover the team. I think for both of us, right? Like I've told people, I think my first 2 seasons was 4-12 and 5-11. So like we've been through it to get to these kind of glory
Yeah.
days we're getting to now, right? You and me started kind of around the same time on this network, so we kind of had to go through the trials and tribulations
Yeah.
to get to this point. It's a super exciting time for both teams, and the great thing about the Locked On Podcast Network is it's your team every day. You can find the show on anywhere you find your podcast from, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever. Make sure you rate and review the show if you like it as well. I know that always keeps us going for sure. You can find the Chargers on Locked On Chargers and subscribe there on the YouTube page as well. But we also post everything to all of our social media as well. You can find me once again on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports. Once again, that's your boy Q from Locked On Raiders at your boy Q254. Super excited for this weekend. Make sure you guys are with us to check out the post-game shows and the previews that we still have to get into this week. But until then, guys, we will talk to you soon. Go Bolts.
Good luck.
You can respond to that. I mean, I'm ending with gold bolts. I mean, but you got to say something.
Just baby. How about that?
Yeah. All right, we'll wrap it up then, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.